The new Canyon Aeroad CFR lays claim to being the fastest road bike on the market. Developed through computational fluid dynamics and wind tunnel testing, it weighs only 7.3 kilograms. That's only 500 grams above the UCI minimum weight. We've glimpsed it at the World Tour and now we have it in the flesh. And after a few rides, I can confirm this is absolutely rapid. I've been surprised to see the ride data coming out after I've done a big, fast ride. However, all that said, there's a lot beneath the surface of this bike beyond just being quick, and we'd like to tell you a little bit about that.
Now there are three tiers of the new Canyon Aeroad. The Aeroad CFR, the CF SLX and the CF SL. This is the top tier Canyon Aeroad CFR, which is the most advanced in terms of composite layout and comes in at the lightest weight. Canyon claim it's 168 grams lighter than the previous top tier Aeroad at a weight of only 915 grams. And we can believe that because the overall build of this bike comes in at only 7.3 kilograms, which is astoundingly light for an aerodynamic road bike, and a lot of that weight saving must come from the frame. The CF SL below that is markedly different though, because it has external cable routing from the handlebar to the frame and is mechanical shifting only as a result of that. Now, as an aerodynamic road bike, the main appeal of this bike is always going to be its aerodynamic performance, and Canyon has some pretty impressive claims for how quick this is, as tested in the wind tunnel. In terms of the bike alone, it's 7.5 watts faster than the previous generation Canyon Aeroad. However, to make a more real-world testing scenario, Canyon actually developed a set of carbon fibre legs, which they've endearingly called Ferdy. And with Ferdy attached to the bike is still 4.5 watts faster than the previous Aeroad. Now 4.5 watts may seem a little insignificant, but keep in mind that's 4.5 watts of completely free speed, and that isn't even taking into account the lighter weight of the bike or the increased rigidity. So overall, with this bike compared to the last Aeroad, you'll probably be going substantially quicker, which is quite impressive because the Aeroad itself was a really quick bike that won on the World Tour stage. What's really interesting in terms of the new Aeroad is that it actually has quite a few nods to practicality. Here at the front end, we've got this completely integrated no-cable handlebar stem combo. But unlike other bikes which have been designed with these integrated handlebar stem combos, and they can't actually be removed very easily, Canyon has developed this with what it calls the Cockpit wings, and that means that the edges of the handlebar can basically be removed and folded down. That is great for travel because it effectively means you don't have to take the front end off at all. You just have to remove these extensions of the handlebars, slot them down, and then it can be put in a bag to be taken on a plane. But equally, as all of Canyon's bikes are delivered in a box, it means it's really easy to assemble for the user. The one extra benefit as well is that because you have these extensions, you can actually adjust the width of the bar by 20 millimeters on each side. And again, for someone dialing in the marginal gains of how narrow or wide that handlebar is, that's going to be quite a significant advantage. Now this is called the CP0018 handlebar. I know, a catchy name. For now, there's going to be some customization for the length of the stem and for the drop of the bars, but Canyon has also developed a higher end, flatter CP0015 handlebar that's going to be really quite flat and offer more of a slam stem setup, but for now that's only available to pro riders. Now, there's also been some clever component design at the rear of the bike. The seat post, which Canyon calls the SP0046, is a substantial change from the last Aeroad seat post, which was a lot narrower and, as a result, flexed a little bit more and offered a little bit more comfort over potholes and road scarring. I was kind of struck by this because I thought maybe it meant that the Aeroad was sacrificing a little bit of comfort in this new design. However, there's a lot more complexity below the skin with this seat post. It's effectively two cylinders, with the front half being the structural half of the seat post and the rear half being an aerodynamic shroud. The clamp actually clamps into the front half, and effectively it flexes from there, meaning that it really delivers a lot more comfort than you expect and a lot more than a normal seat post that is one structural piece that is this deep.
Now, factors like that seat post design may seem esoteric, maybe even a little over-engineered, but they're really important to how this bike works overall as a system. And that's because the rear end of the bike, the bottom bracket, is so rigid. You just have to look at it, how wide a section of carbon it is, to understand how stiff that is. And that's great when it comes to delivering power. It really feels like pushing against a brick wall. But at the same time, that can compromise comfort, which in turn affects handling. The effect of having this intelligent seat post design means that that stiffness is really balanced out, and you're able to handle in the sense with comfort, and that in turn helps your accuracy and just helps you relax when descending. In terms of the rear end, The other factor that's really interesting is the fact that they've shortened the chainstays on this compared to the last Aeroad. This has 410mm chainstays compared to 415. That's a small difference, but it makes it ever so slightly more snappy and sharp in terms of its handling character going downhill or around sharp corners. And that's really important because it then mirrors the handling performance of the rim brake equivalent bike. And there's really no sacrifices in terms of disc brakes here. It just adds to braking performance, but doesn't detract from weight, rigidity or handling in any way.
Of course, the front end is also really important to handling. Here, the front end of the Canyon is doing a pretty good job. The fork is stiff and the handlebars have a pretty nice bit of give to them. While they're rigid from side to side, when going over bumps, you just get a little bit of flex, which is really important to enabling you to relax and ultimately not get bounced off the bike. Moving on to the spec of the bike, there's been a really interesting choice in terms of the tyre spec. On the front, we have 25mm radius tyres versus on 28mm on the back. Canyon's engineers argue that the modern aero wheels were developed for 25mm tyres, so they haven't followed the trend to use wider tyres in the front wheel as many other manufacturers have. But at the rear, the aerodynamic cost of a wider tyre really isn't felt when the air has already travelled over your legs and over the frame to hit the rear wheel. The benefit, of course, is that you have a wider contact area and you can run lower PSI at the back and, as a result, improve comfort. Despite that mismatch of spec, the whole bike comes together really well and there's no sense of imbalance when it comes to the handling. And when it comes to taking corners quickly, I really felt as though I could carve the bike around a corner and carry a lot of speed. For some, the choice of wheels may be a little unconventional. The Aero CFR comes with DT Swiss die-cut 62 wheels. These are fairly deep at 62mm, and these days, especially at the front, we may more commonly see 35mm or 50mm rim depths. That's generally because you get less disturbance in crosswinds with a shallower rim. For me, having ridden 80mm front wheels back when that was more fashionable, and having done a lot of time trial, I wasn't really disturbed by the slight crosswind effect that tends to influence the steering. But some people may prefer a shallower rim which will have a little bit more stability in high winds. At the same time, there are clear gains to that deeper front wheel, and Canyon argue the bike even has a sort of sailing effect at the right angle of wind, where effectively it carries itself forward. But we'd have to see a little more data to verify that. That said, there's no doubting this bike seems to be pretty quick at any angle of wind. And Canyon actually designed this to cope really well with a wide variety of yaw angles. It was designed to perform best between 0 degrees and 20 degrees of yaw, which is the angle at which the wind hits the bike. That means it's designed for a wider range of wind angles than many other aerodynamic road bikes on the market. But that said, many people would argue that reflects more realistically the kind of wind that we actually experience in places like the UK. Ultimately, combining its aerodynamics with its rigidity and its lightweight, this bike is every bit as quick as it looks in almost every setting, whether it's climbing, descending, or just cruising along on flat terrain.
So on the whole, we've been pretty impressed by our first few rides with the Canyon Aeroad. It's a really impressive step on from what Canyon have done previously with the Aeroad, but it still retains the same DNA as that other bike. From a glance, it kind of looks pretty similar. The technology under the skin and at the touch points like the handlebar and the seat post is really impressive. And again, it's actually really focused on what the consumer needs. Like, these removable cockpit wings are going to be a big advantage for cyclists like me that like to travel with their bike a lot, or equally just want to make minor adjustments. An interesting thing about the Aeroad though, looking at it broadly, is that it's actually diverged from the rest of the market, in that it's committed itself more to aerodynamics, where other brands have gone for more versatility. For a lot of people, the Canyon Ultimate might present a better option for riding on different terrains, maybe going off-road, but this is going to be purely quite a dedicated road bike and pretty much revolving around speed. So for anyone who's a Strava basher, a road racer, or just wants the quickest bike they can possibly have, this is going to be a great option. Obviously we can't make any direct comparisons between this and the SL7 or the Trek Madone yet, but after a few months of testing we'll hopefully be able to make some conclusions about that. One key thing about this bike though is that it does offer a lot more affordability. Even though it's a £7,000 bike, it's still a lot cheaper than the likes of the top S-Works or the top Trek. So ultimately I think this will be a really successful bike across the market, from the CFR to the CF-SLX to the CF-SL. And we look forward to spending a few more months to it to really get our teeth into its ride character. We really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more of our content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit cyclist.co.uk.